Welcome to today's webinar on the broad topic of innovation. We've called it the what, why, and how of innovative leadership. Let me introduce you to the people who will be participating today. I'll be with you. My colleague, Joe Folkman, will be with you as well, making part of the presentation. Toward the end of our presentation, you'll get a chance to hear from Tracy Consolini, one of our regional vice presidents, who has some useful information and a good offer to share with you at the end of the webinar. And finally, Jennifer Lambert, one of our senior client executives, will be our chat host today. So Tracy, say hi to the people if you will, so that they'll know who you are as the time goes. Okay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're glad you're here.
And if you have questions or your requests, please put them in the chat box, chat room, and Jennifer Lambert will be trying to answer them for you. So, Joe, we want to begin with asking our people on the call to respond to a poll.
As I go out and talk to people about innovation, I usually ask them, how important is it in your business? Is it the number one? Is it the most important thing you do? Is it one of the top three, top five? There's a poll that's popping up right now. And we'd just love you to kind of respond to that, kind of where that comes in your organization. How important is innovation in your organization? And I think the results are probably, you know, I'm anticipating it's going to be pretty important, but we'll see. We'll see if people agree. So Terry, what's our results here? Well, it didn't hit the number one spot, right? Only about 3% said it's number one, but 40% said top three, and then 36% top five. 21% in the top 10. So it's one of the most important issues in most organizations. So I think that's interesting, Jack. Does that surprise you?
Well, it doesn't surprise me. It's a very interesting topic. And maybe that kind of takes us on to that next slide about the importance of innovation. So many times, well, Joe, you're going to talk about this, I think, aren't you? About the, what is it ranked globally?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So what's interesting is that it comes in, you know, for most of the people on the call in the top three. But we ask, well, 1.6 million people, right? As they're giving feedback to managers, we said, here's 19 leadership capabilities. Which one? And they can select the 4 that are most important for this leader to do well, to be successful in their current job. And as you can see, innovates comes in 14th. That's not one of the top 3. And that's surprise. Jack, does that surprise you? It's that low?
Well, it does. And as I started to say earlier, that it's a tricky question because it may be different depending on who you're talking to. And also top management often kind of realizes that innovation is their future. And so they talk about it with very passionate terms. But somehow leaders don't always get that same message. Mm-hmm. And my hunch is it's because innovation is very much about the future and about the long-term destiny of the organization. And we tend to reward a lot of managers in the organization on the basis of today's results, you know, today's performance, you know, their collaboration, their teamwork, their ability to solve problems. And so we are rewarding them on a number of different behaviors that aren't necessarily the long-term or future-oriented kinds of issues. And that's why we have this kind of mixed message about innovation.
We really do. And, you know, what's interesting is we looked at the 100,000 leaders and ranked their effectiveness on innovation. Remember that it was 14th on importance. It's 13th on effectiveness. And Jack, you're exactly right. And you know, my friend Stephen Covey used to say, what's urgent versus important? And urgent wins a lot. And what was urgent seems like it's taking initiative, technical expertise, drive for results, solving problems, strategic perspective, right? Valuing diversity. But the innovation, most people say it's important, but the managers just don't get that message. And because of that, well, not all of them are really skilled at it, but some are. Some are incredibly skilled at it. And we're going to talk about them today, and we're going to give you a sense of what they were doing that the others weren't doing.
Yeah, I think Clayton Christensen, the late Clayton Christensen, a Harvard Business School professor, really became well known for his passion about the topic of innovation. And he kind of identified that unsuccessful companies do focus on immediate customers' needs, their ability to adapt and adopt to new business models, but they don't think about the future and don't think about the long-term destiny of the organization. So today we're going to be talking about what we've learned about why some leaders are innovative, and we'll be talking about two basic issues. One is, how do individuals become more innovative, and particularly what do individuals as leaders in their leadership position, what do they do to be really effective in encouraging innovation? And secondly, just toward the end of our webinar today, we will talk about what do organizations do that creates the environment, that creates the culture, the context for innovation to really happen. So let's just jump right in. In terms of what happens to individuals and how can we increase individual performance in creating this innovation climate, let me tell you about two different research approaches that we used to come to the information that we're about to share with you. The first approach was a clinical approach. We worked with a large communication technology firm who asked us to do a study on their leaders who were most innovative. So we identified the leaders in this organization who were at the 99th percentile and above on the topic of innovation. We interviewed those leaders along with all of their direct reports. And we described in the interview that their leader had been chosen for her or his innovative qualities. And we wanted to understand what this person did that was different from other managers with whom they had worked, and what behaviors seemed to stand out to them. We collected a wide variety of examples of what these leaders did to promote this innovative culture. So we would describe that broadly as our clinical study of innovation. The second part of our research came from our database of over 100,000 leaders at this time. And we analyzed those who had the highest scores on innovation. And then we looked at what other behaviors did that group of leaders display that really kind of set them apart from their colleagues in the organization. So the data we're about to share with you comes from these two separate kind of research approaches, which we've kind of smushed together to give you this more comprehensive list of 10 things that seem to kind of come to light that were really key in creating this culture of innovation. So Joe, start us out.
Well, we start with this whole issue of having an excellent strategy and vision, a vision that is forward thinking and is focused around the future. I mean, one of the things you have to kind of understand is in order to be innovative, things got to change. And if you stick to your netting, if you continue to do in the future what you've done in the past, you're not going to be an innovative organization. So part of that vision needs to take innovation into account and consider how things are going to change in the future and where we need to go to stay at the top of our game and to be one of the most respected companies in the world.
You know, and I recall in those conversations we had with people in this organization, some of the subordinates would say, my boss constantly talks about the ultimate call center on how it would function. And they would never talk about how we're going to get there, but they just really focused on the vision. Well, the second thing that we found was that the most innovative leaders had a very strong customer focus. They were really prone to convene focus groups. They conducted interviews with their clients. They made calls personally on customers. They really did their best to truly understand the customer's needs. And one of them, I remember saying on the call, we basically try never to say no to a customer. We feel like we've failed if we have to say to a customer, no, we can't do that. There was just this very intense focus on pleasing, satisfying, meeting the customer's needs.
You know, and it was more than just understanding the customer and having a relationship, but really knowing their business and how it worked and what they needed in the future. The third thing was this issue of reciprocal trust. Here's the problem. Some innovations fail. And if you happen to be a direct report that works on an innovation that fails, what happens to you? And we heard over and over again, I know my manager has my back. I know that if this thing doesn't work out, they're going to take care of me. They're not going to throw me under the bus. And there's so many stories about when innovation fails that whoever tries to innovate, you know, if it doesn't work out, they get thrown under the bus. Their career is over. This is a career-ending job here. But we found this was a significant factor that people really believed that manager would take care of them if things didn't go well.
The fourth thing we found was what we've described as a fearless loyalty to the organization and customers. When the word loyalty gets used in today's world, it's often sort of applied to personal loyalty to your boss. And what was really dramatic in these interviews that we had was the frequency with which people said, my manager, this manager who was at the 99th percentile on innovation, my manager is fearless in her willingness to challenge the hierarchy and defend the right of the customers. She's not afraid to kind of tackle tough issues. He's not at all, you know, kind of unwilling to take the thorny problems. So loyalty was very much to the organization and to the customer, and not necessarily to the upper layers of the hierarchy. In fact, one of them said, this manager is seen by many people as being inverse to the hierarchy. And I laughed about that. So this was a very unique observation that we found.
You went native.
Yeah, right.
The fifth thing was this culture that magnifies upwards communication. The people that really know what's going on, that really know where the problems are, that really know what needs to be fixed, are those people that are down at the bottom of the organization. They're the people that are solving those problems every day. They're fixing the reoccurring problems. Jack, I've made a lot of money through my career going into organizations and having senior leaders say, we don't understand this, tell us what's going on. And I go out and interview people at the bottom of the organization and they say, it's this and this and this. And write a fancy report and bring it back to senior management. And then they go, wow, Folkman, you're brilliant. This was great. You discovered all these problems. Yeah, it was hard, but I figured this all out myself, which wasn't true. I mean, honestly, the senior leaders could have done that, but they didn't.
Well,
Yeah.
what I found interesting was the number of times people would say, my manager believes and constantly tells us that the best ideas are bubbling up from underneath. They're not trickling down from on high.
Yeah.
And so people really believed that what they had to say was important.
Very true.
The next thing we observed was the emphasis that these highly innovative leaders placed on recruiting. They spent a lot of time trying to find people who were diverse, who were kind of wild ducks sometimes and didn't fit the mold of all the rest of the people in the group. But they were after A players, and they wanted people who were really going to make an important contribution to the organization. That was very, very interesting to me.
The seventh thing is excelling via stretch goals. And what's interesting about stretch goals is that people that resist them, they're never pushed to innovate. But people that set stretch goals, that try to do something that's really, really difficult, it's impossible to get there by doing what we currently do. It's impossible for us to make that goal by just doing the same thing more often, quicker, fast. We've got to find some new ways to do it. We've got to find some new approaches. So a real element in this whole issue of innovation is stretch goals that push you to do something that's out of the ordinary, that can't be done using our current processes.
The next element that we found fascinating was the emphasis on speed. I recall one of the people with whom I talked said, when we move fast, it builds excitement and speeds up the flow of energy and new ideas. So what we heard over and over again was the highly innovative leaders were those who had a great sense of urgency. They were the ones who would advocate for creating a rapid prototype. And they weren't trying to, they were concerned about their teams burning out. They weren't pushing them, in a cruel kind of way, but they were just impatient with the status quo. And they had this constant urgency of let's challenge the status quo.
Jack, we found that out 5 years before we wrote our book on speed, didn't we?
Yeah. That was part of what caused us to write the book.
I think so. We heard it there. Okay, so the next one is this candid communication. And if you just go along, if you sort of agree with everything, if nobody pushes back, you're never going to get innovation. Innovation creates some conflict. Not everybody's going to agree. And when people, tend to sort of just be nice, play nice, don't ruffle the feathers, it's not going to be an innovative organization. People need to be candid. They need to push back. Having that culture that supports that is critical.
And the last thing we observed and heard so frequently was the importance of inspiring and motivating behavior. I recall one person on a call said, for innovation to exist, you have to feel inspired. You don't want to bring new ideas to someone that you know is going to rain on your parade. And the prevalence of these very warm, close relationships between the leader and his or her direct reports was just really remarkable. So those were the 10 items that this combination of approach that we used, the clinical approach and the analysis of our 360-degree feedback data, seemed to really clearly point to in terms of the factors that create this culture of innovation and that describe the behavior of the most innovative leaders.
And we're going to later in this podcast, we're going to talk about something we call strength builders. And the strength builders really connect to these, but we've tried to reduce them and get just the very few. So we're going to talk about 5 strength builders that are connected to these that help an individual leader become better at innovation. One of the things that we found when we looked at innovation, if you were below the 75th percentile on an innovation, when we looked at your overall leadership effectiveness rating, your rating about how effective you are as a leader, you came in a whopping 40th percentile. But if you were if you were in the top quartile on innovation, your overall effectiveness rating went to the 82nd percentile. Wow. We think there's some influence there from just being innovative. And if we looked at individual contributors, we also found a very strong relationship between innovation and ratings on performance ratings on productivity and effort. And you can see here on the graph on the horizontal axis, we have innovation effectiveness from the bottom 10% to the top 10%. And then you have the average productivity and effort ratings for these 2 dimensions, these 2 performance rankings. So individual contributors are also really helped by being innovative. And this is from 12,929 individual contributors. Another thing we found when we looked at the data was an interesting trend. And what we looked at here was leaders who were rated above average, right? So they were, they were above the 50th percentile on overall leadership effectiveness. And then we looked at these 2 competencies, strategic perspective and innovates. And as you can see, at the younger employees, 25 to 35, their scores on innovates were much higher. And then they tended to go down over time. Now down here is relative because it goes from the 71st percentile to the 65th percentile. So it's not cratered. It's just that strategic perspective becomes more important later in your career. But innovates is a great way for a young manager to differentiate themselves and to demonstrate a skill that's very important in the organization. Jack, I don't know if you've noticed that with some younger employees.
Oh my, and that, yeah, by being highly innovative, coming up with new ideas, new approaches to the marketplace, I think it gets them noticed, and what often leads to their being elevated to the more senior positions. And then strategic perspective becomes really important.
Yep. So if you look at the connection between leadership effectiveness by direct reports on innovation and employee engagement, what you see here is that leaders who are very ineffective at innovation, their engagement for their direct reports is only at the 27th percentile, but the best leaders at innovation, their engagement is at the 78th percentile. Looks like people like to work for a leader who's innovative and not somebody who's never going to try something new, who's just stuck in the mud. So innovation is connected to engagement, but it's also, even more importantly, it's connected to the percentage of employees who are willing to go the extra mile. We call this discretionary effort. Every day when an employee comes to work, they make a decision. Am I going to do the minimum amount of work possible? Or am I going to give you all my energy, all my effort, 100%? And this is the 100%ers. The worst leaders, they get 17%. They're lucky to get that. But the best leaders, they get in the 80th percentile, 50%, and in the 90th percentile to the 100th, they get 66% of their employees who are willing to give extra effort. Imagine the difference that makes in your team to get work done, to get difficult things accomplished. The third study we have here is, again, ratings of direct reports on innovates and the percentage of employees who think about quitting. Right now, we're going through the great resignment. Lots of people are quitting. And you can see they're more likely to quit, those leaders who don't ever want to innovate, right? 13%, or I'm sorry, 46% of those leaders who don't want to innovate are thinking about quitting, but only 13%, if you're really good at innovation, are thinking about quitting. This next study looks at levels in the organization. And as you can see, it's interesting. These are not huge differences, but top managers tend to be rated as more innovative than lower level managers and supervisors and individual contributors. So that's kind of good news for top management. And I guess they're looking out there and thinking, boy, we need to innovate, or we're going to get in trouble here.
So let's just take a little pause and kind of just summarize what we've covered. We've seen that innovation has a very substantial impact on a leader's overall effectiveness. Secondly, we've seen that innovation can be even more important for people early in their careers. We've seen also that leaders who are more innovative have direct reports, subordinates, who are more engaged, less likely to quit, and much more likely to go that extra mile and put forth that discretionary effort. And then we've seen that as people age, their effectiveness in innovating sort of declines, except for the leaders who get promoted into top management positions. And there it seems to remain at a higher level. So that's our kind of recap of what we've described and discussed so far.
So we thought it'd be interesting for you to look at your self-report. Now, if you didn't do the self-assessment yet, you can still do it. And the first section of it is a scale that measures your propensity or preference for innovation. Now, I've had a lot of people talk to me about this, and they said, I don't know how this works because there weren't any bad answers. And that's true. You had to choose between the alternatives. And the alternative to innovation is always good, right? It's always good. But we actually ran the statistics here, and we had 360 assessments on 236 leaders and their ratings on innovation. And then we had this scale, and we found that there was a 0.32 correlation. Now that's not exceptional, but for a projective test like this, it is exceptional. It's a very strong correlation. So if you got a negative number, then that's just telling you that you prefer other things other than innovation. You like to drive for results more, or you like to build relationships more. But if you got a plus number, that shows you your interest and excitement and passion towards innovation. And we think there's a connection between your preference and ultimately your effectiveness, because we tend to kind of engage in things we prefer. So that's an interesting kind of a number for you, and you can look at that. And I know I'm going to get people writing me saying, no, that can't be true. Well, okay. It's not perfect, but I think it's pretty good. Anything else on that, Jack?
No, I think that covers it.
Well, one of the things that I looked at was I did this kind of fun study where I looked at people that were low on innovation and low on inspiration, right? And then I looked at the overall leadership effectiveness of these people. And they ended up being at the 13th percentile. Not a good place to be. And then I looked at people who were high on innovation, but low on inspiration. And it goes up. It goes from the 13th to the 40th. But as you think about it, if you look at the last bar there, high on innovation, high on inspiration, you have to conclude there's something going on there. When you mix those two things together, you get something different. I remember a few years ago, I went, opened my garage door on a warm Saturday, you know, and my two boys were in in the garage, and they were trying to build something with a pop bottle. And I said, "What are you creating?" And they said, "A bomb." So they were mixing some things together that went boom. And this is kind of what this does. When you mix these two things together, now, one of the things that you got to understand from this is there's something about these two things that when you mix them together, you get more. We call that a powerful combination. And we're going to show you a little bit how that it impacts. And so what we found when people start to think about, how do I get better at innovation? They just sort of say, well, just be more innovative. And, that gets you a little bit ahead, but not much. This is a little bit like when I drive my old truck and I put it in first gear. Yes, it moves, but it doesn't ever go fast until I put it in second, third, fourth, and fifth, right? You've got to shift the gears. And this is the idea of how you get really good at innovation. So Jack, tell us about our research.
I will. So Joe mentioned earlier that we have in our research developed the idea of strength builders. And these are behaviors that we have found to be statistically significantly correlated with different leadership skills. And so when we looked at the innovation competency, we found that there were indeed 5 other behaviors that went hand in hand with that were very strongly correlated. And the 5 are depicted here on the screen. And so we're going to just talk a little bit about each one of those, because assuming that you as leaders in your own organization would like to be perceived as being highly innovative, along with being many other things, but how do you get there? What might you do to accomplish that? So let's begin by talking about the first one, inspires and motivates. We've noted there on the screen that a key ingredient of innovation is inspiration, and that creating this environment that's full of excitement and enthusiasm does help others to be more innovative. I recall in one of my conversations with this leader in a technology company and all of her subordinates, there was a statement made that I guess I'll never forget. They'd talked and they'd kind of joked and bantered back and forth with each other. But at the end of the conversation, she said, "I hope you guys know how much I love working with you." And I thought to myself, wow, that what an inspiring leader she is to communicate so openly how much she enjoys working with these people and what they do. And so we describe as this first strength builder, this quality of being an inspiring and motivating leader.
And they saw the effect that had in that first graph. The second thing that is a really significant companion behavior of strength builders, champions change. And in order to innovate, people need to be willing to change. I mean, if you're not willing to change, it's hard to even think about innovation. Jack, I keep thinking about the Luddites here. Occasionally, Jack and I we're called Luddites, but actually, Jack's one of the most innovative people I know. But the Luddites were a group of radical textile workers in Nottingham, England, between 1811 and 1816, and the machinery to create textiles were brought into the mills. And these people realized they were going to lose their job, and so they went in one night and destroyed all the machinery, and they resisted this technology, right? And it did not turn out well for them. The first thing that was interesting was, creating textiles by hand was not a fun job. And while they did lose, some of them lost their jobs, there were other jobs that got created because of this. In fact, the textile industry in England just really prospered, and it really built the economy, and there were lots of jobs in the future. So what Jack and I did a few years ago is we thought about Luddites today, and those are people that resist digital technology. And we found some absolute clear evidence that many people in the workforce who weren't on the, they didn't need to be on the cutting edge, but weren't above average in terms of their technical, digital expertise, were rated as less effective leaders. Unfortunately, the group where only 22% of them were rated above average was the older group. And so as time goes on, I think it's important that all of us embrace innovation and are willing to change. And that's an important part of being an innovative leader.
The third strength builder that we found shows courage. And we've certainly on this topic, it would seem that the area where courage is most important to be exhibited is the area in which the manager interacts with the people above her or above him in the organization. And bringing on a new idea, a new project, a new process often requires telling somebody in a higher up position that you're proposing a new approach. You're proposing doing away with that and implementing something new. And having the courage to have those conversations seems to be really important. Innovation does mean taking a risk. And so we urge you to kind of consider how do you go about displaying more courage, especially in your relationships with people who are above you in the hierarchy.
Jack, I remember in our original study on this when they would find something that was opposite of government regulations, and everybody would stop. So we can't mess with the government. And again, the leader would say, well, let's explore it. Regulations can change, let's look at this. And so they would push it, they push past boundaries that other people, no, stop here. And they'd push past those boundaries, and that took a lot of
and it was constantly this question and response of why not?
Yeah.
That it's easy for people to say, well, we've always done it that way, or no, you can't do that. Why not?
Why not?
And that willingness to be tough about that.
The next strength builder is communicates powerfully, keeping others informed about your progress on projects, along with clear instructions on roles and responsibilities. It's critical for innovation to succeed. Here's what we know about communicates powerfully. It is the easiest competency to improve on. And people are, they just are a little bit lazy. I mean, they're lax on their communication. They're not regular. They don't keep people informed. Developing a habit of keeping others informed and where we're at, where we need to go, and knowing that just because you said it once, people are going to hear it. We're all teenagers in this respect. You've got to say it over and over and repeat it. That's critical. The other thing that's relevant here is this whole idea of upwards communication, of listening to those people at all levels of the organization and be open to what they have to say, and really listening to people, across the organization, and especially the customers. Communications is a critical skill in really improving innovation.
And the final strength builder that we would call your attention to is one that we've labeled strategic perspective. We note here that innovating without a clear strategic perspective is like driving without knowing your destination. It was striking in these conversations that we had with the leaders in this large communication technology company, how frequently they would talk about the importance of having a vision that would their manager would paint, paint a very clear picture of what the future would look like. They would not focus on how are we going to get there, what are the steps, the milestones and things. They would very much keep riveted on this. Here's where we're going. Here's the ultimate goal. And they had the ability to paint that with very sharp, dramatic color so that everybody could understand it. So we know that the combination of strategic vision and innovation is important. And this diagram maybe portrays what our findings would show. Innovative ideas by themselves get you a certain distance. Having a clear strategy and a clear vision gets you a certain distance. But when you combine those two, when you put those two together, you go much, much further. So we would strongly urge you who are thinking about how do I get better at being an innovative leader, focus on clarity of strategy to help you get there.
So in the self-assessment, what we did is we gave you two kind of assessments there on the strength builders. There's 5 strength builders. The first assessment looks at your preference. Do you love it or do you hate it, right? So where are you? And again, this isn't your effectiveness. This isn't the need. This is just your preference. I like to do this. I don't like to do that. And it's not necessarily bad that you don't like to do something. It's just not your cup of tea, right? So the numbers here, if it's a negative number, like you can see on the example, -4 on shows courage, it's like, that's not my cup of tea. But you can see that developing strategic perspective is their cup of tea, right? And so this just shows you your passion about doing something. And passion's really important as you try to get better at something. I mean, if you're working on something that's not your cup of tea, you're probably going to be less willing to do it. If you're passionate about it, you're going to be more willing to do it. So this just shows you your desire and your energy and your willingness to do something. So that's the first part of the assessment. The second part measures your effectiveness on these 5 areas. And again, we had a rating scale from needs significant improvement to outstanding strength. So the best number you could get here is 5. The worst number would be 1. But you can see where your score is on these things. And so it's interesting that this person that rated themselves 12 on strategic perspectives rates themselves 5.0 in terms of effectiveness. It's like one of their top things. And so as you think about it, how good am I at this particular thing? Now, we also ask you to rate your effectiveness at innovates, okay? And so you can see your score on that. And then we show you the norms that we've collected. These are norms based on 110,000 leaders. So you can compare your score to the norms and kind of see where you come out. Here's what we found, and here's the thing to remember about this. If you have a fatal flaw in any one of these 5 areas, your ability to innovate is at the 27th percentile. So if you're terrible at any of them, it's probably going to hurt you. But if you just sort of say, well, these are 5 things, Zenger and Folkman think these are all connected, I'm gonna work on being better at 1 or better at 2 or better at 3. Well, you notice your ability to innovate improves. It gets slightly better and slightly better. But here's another approach. And most of you that know us well know that we believe in this idea of strength building. You don't have to be perfect at everything. And if you just pick one of those 5 things and you decide to make it a strength, right? Make it a strength at the 90th percentile, your ability to innovate goes up to the 73rd percentile. And if you do 2 well, the 81st percentile, 3 well, the 86th percentile, 4 well, the 91st percentile. So you don't have to be perfect at all of them, but if you just did 1 well, that would really help you. So the next thing we're going to do is ask you to think about which one.
Which one do you take? So we would invite you to follow this process. Ask yourself, do I have a fatal flaw? Which means something I'm really kind of not very good at all. And maybe like you're in the bottom 10 percentile of people on that particular behavior. Do I have such a thing on any one of them? And if you do, as Joe suggested, you may want to think about, how do I fix that? That may be the easiest thing to fix. But if that's not the case, would improving that behavior have a significant positive impact on my performance in my current job? And am I reasonably passionate about improving that behavior? So as you think about, do I have something that's detracting from my performance, or of these behaviors, which one could I adopt that would have the most beneficial impact on my performance in my current job? So let's just take a second and have you kind of think about those 5. And we're going to ask you, just as a matter of our curiosity, which one of those do you lean toward? And that doesn't mean that you can't change your mind as you think about going forward, but we're just kind of curious which of these seems to be the one that shows the most promise.
So Jack, which one do you think is going to be number 1?
I think number 1 is going to be communicates powerfully.
Really? I'm betting on inspires.
That's because you told people that's the easiest one to fix.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Maybe inspires will be the one. Okay, Jerry, show us our results. Yes, you were right.
It's pretty close.
Inspires others. Well, thank you for letting us know. Obviously, there's no right or wrong answer. It's the one that makes most sense to you and for you. So thank you very much for doing that. If you will fill out the exit survey, we will be happy to send you this Strength Builder Development Guide. It shows our research on some very specific developmental suggestions about what you can do to strengthen your ability in each of those 5 areas. And so you'll be able to get that when you complete the exit survey. Now, just the final thing I want to cover, and this will be very brief, is this, that innovation is obviously what individuals do and how they behave, but there are things that organizations can do that really create the context. And so we want to emphasize that organizational culture does reinforce the individual behaviors that we've described. As one person said to me on our call years ago, it's pretty hard to have innovation in an organization that's at war. And we certainly see that in today's world. But it's clear that organizations that are innovative do emphasize people relationships, and they have created this positive work environment. And we've listed there some of the elements of that culture that does encourage that positive work environment, which involves simple processes, strong networks, speed, being willing to experiment, do rapid prototypes. And then, of course, this emphasis on teamwork, collaboration. And then in today's world, I think, as we all know, there's this growing interest and concern about having real diversity, equity, and inclusion. So with that, we would conclude with just a quotation from a person I don't know well, but we thought it was a wonderful quotation. Innovation is the unrelenting drive to break the status quo and develop anew where few have dared to go. And we hope that you will kind of think about how you would apply that as you use those 5 strength builders to increase your effectiveness. And now I turn the time to Tracy Consolini, who has we think a wonderful and special offer for you. So Tracy, we'll turn the microphone to you and let you kind of take it away.
Thanks to everyone for participating today. Jack and Joe shared how leaders are empowered to innovate by leveraging the 5 strength building behaviors. We hope you're leaving with a sense of your preference and effectiveness with regards to those behaviors. And we do have a special offer for you. To help your team or others within your organization learn about their preference, their effectiveness, and how to be more innovative, you can host the Innovative Leadership Development Experience. We're offering an exclusive discount to all who have participated today. If you schedule a session by May 30th, the cost will be $5,000 for up to 25 participants, which is a discount of $2,500. And as we move forward, feedback is a gift, and we would love yours. As we conclude, you have the opportunity to give feedback and receive a development guide, as Jack mentioned, that provides suggestions for simple, effective, and easy to implement behavior shifts that will increase your ability to innovate. As we conclude, an exit survey will launch, or you can go to bit.ly/dg-innovate to find that exit survey. Once you complete it, you'll be presented or provided the option to download the development guide. We truly appreciate your feedback and your participation, and we look forward to speaking with you if it would be helpful, and hope you'll join us again next month.